Welcome back for another deep dive. Ready to explore something we all deal with, emotions.
We'll be listening to and discussing parts of a lecture, kind of unpacking what they're saying about emotions.
So it's time to ask, what are emotions really? Automatic? Cultural? Maybe. Both. I'm ready to dive in.
Well, maybe we can start with the emotion program theory. Ever heard of it?
I haven't actually. Tell me more. What's that all about?
Okay, imagine a car like screeching right at you. Your heart starts pounding, your muscles tense up, you jump back. The theory is that basically your brain's got this affect program for fear and it's going off.
So it's instant, like an automatic reaction, no time to think.
Exactly. Researchers, like Ekman and Friesen, they actually found that your body reacts differently to different emotions. Like they measured heart rate, skin response, muscle tension, all that. Turns out fear, anger, disgust, they all have unique signatures.
So even if they're all negative, our body knows the difference.
Exactly. They're not just all lumped together as negative. And, this kind of points to a strong biological basis for emotions. But then that brings up another question, right? Are these programs the same in every culture?
Like, would someone in Japan, experience fear the same way as someone in Brazil?
Yeah, that's the big question. And early research is pointing to yes, probably. Levinson, Ekman, Friesen, again, they did studies in other cultures, and they found similar patterns across the board.
That's wild. Okay, but how does this work in the brain? Is there, literally a program running for each emotion?
Well, that's still up for debate.
Yeah.
It might not be a literal program,
Mhm.
but the speed and complexity of it all definitely points to something specialized going on.
So it's more complicated than just, flipping a switch.
Way more. But, okay, this program thing, it's interesting, but it doesn't tell us everything, right? Like, what starts these emotions in the first place? Are we, born knowing what to fear? Or is it learned?
Well, some things you just pull back from instantly, but others, yeah, you learn to react to them over time.
Exactly. And there's research to back up both sides, actually. There's a researcher, Watson, and he found that even babies, brand new babies, they have some innate responses, like fear of loud noises, losing balance, stuff like that. They also, rage if you restrain them, and then obviously they love gentle touch. Pleasure from that.
So we're born with some basic emotional responses. I guess that makes sense for survival. But what about, more complex stuff? Jealousy, shame.
Good point. Most triggers, especially for social emotions, those are learned. And that's where culture really comes in. Huge role. For example, have you ever heard of the Japanese word amai?
Nope, can't say that I have.
It's this feeling, kind of like sweet dependence on another person, really deep in Japanese culture.
Interesting. So it's not just nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture. Together, they make this, complex emotional landscape.
You got it. Which brings us to learning preparedness. Basically, we're not blank slates. Some things are easier to learn than others, suggesting an evolutionary bias, you could say.
So we're primed to learn things that helped our ancestors survive.
Exactly. Like, think about disgust. Easy to learn disgust for things that could make you sick, like rotten food, right? Big safeguard for our ancestors.
All about maximizing those survival chances.
Absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
a better safe than sorry principle built right into our genes. Which leads to the next question. Why do we have emotions?
Yeah.
How did they help us survive, reproduce? What's their evolutionary purpose? Things get really interesting here.
Yeah, I want to know. Spill it. What's the evolutionary purpose?
Okay, so remember that whole program idea. Emotions are fast, automatic, crucial in those, fight or flight situations where thinking just takes too long. There's a researcher, Zaijian, he said it best. The decision to run must be made on the basis of minimal cognitive engagement.
Meaning you react before you even have time to think.
Precisely. So fear, boom, triggers fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
Better chance of survival. Disgust keeps you from eating bad stuff. Anger lets you defend yourself, your resources.
Each emotion has its own job, basically.
Yeah. Even surprise.
Mhm.
It makes you focus on new information, which could be super important.
Okay, so emotions aren't just feelings. They're deeply rooted survival mechanisms. But what about when they seem, I don't know, irrational, like phobias? How does that fit in?
Well, that's where that better safe than sorry thing comes in. Reacting when there's no real danger, that's a false positive, right?
Yeah.
But it's less costly than missing a real threat. So those irrational fears, they're leftovers from a system that's all about survival, first and foremost.
It makes you think, huh? Okay, so we've got these powerful ancient mechanisms shaping our behavior, keeping us alive. But how do emotions work with our, higher thinking, Are they totally separate or do they, like, talk to each other?
Well, it's a fascinating back and forth, really. There's evidence that they can be triggered without us even thinking about it. Like, there's this thing called the mere exposure effect, Zajanc again.
Yeah.
It basically shows we develop preferences for things we've seen before, even if we don't remember seeing them.
Wait, so our emotions are making decisions without us knowing?
Kind of, yeah. It suggests that information can be processed emotionally before we're even aware of it. But on the other hand, our thoughts can definitely influence our emotions too. Think about cognitive reappraisal, used in therapy a lot. Basically, changing how you think about a situation to change how you feel about it.
So sometimes emotions lead and sometimes thoughts lead. Back and forth.
Exactly. Which leads to another question. Is there, like, a specific part of our brain for emotions? A special module?
Like a little mini emotional brain inside our brain.
That's the idea of modularity. And there's so evidence that points in that direction, yeah. Ekman, he had this idea of an automatic appraisal mechanism, which fits with this modularity idea.
Incredible. There's so much to learn about how emotions work. But I feel like our deep dive wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about the social constructionist view.
Right. Oh, for sure. We got to talk about that.
Yeah.
The social constructionist view basically challenges the idea that emotions are all biology. Instead, they say it's our culture, the norms and expectations that really shape our emotions.
So there's like a cultural playbook for how to feel.
Yeah, kind of. And there are two main models for how this works. Want to hear about them?
For sure. Hit me with those models.
Okay, so first, there's the social concept model. Basically, this says emotions come from how we judge a situation, and that judging is heavily influenced by our culture.
So our culture teaches us how to feel about things.
Pretty much. Think back to that Japanese ame. Shows how the same situation can make people feel totally different things, depending on their background.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the other model?
This one's called the social role model. Basically says emotions are like roles we play, acting out these culturally defined patterns of behavior. This might explain why some emotional displays seem so over the top, like they're putting on a show.
Like we're performing emotions based on a script.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And within this model, there's the reinforcement version, where we basically learn to act in ways that gets us rewards. Then there's the disclaimed action version, where we basically fake emotions to manipulate people.
Oh, hold up. So maybe it's not always genuine.
Yep. It definitely makes you wonder how much of it is real, right? But here's the thing. Are these two views, the biological and the cultural, are they really opposites? Or could it be both?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Maybe they work together somehow.
That's exactly where this idea of heterogeneous construction comes in.
Yeah.
Basically, our emotional phenotype, that's just a fancy way of saying how we experience and express emotions. It's built from our genes, our culture, our personal experiences, everything mixed together.
Okay, so it's like a multi-layered cake. All these different ingredients.
I like that. A very delicious analogy. And this view helps explain why we see universal patterns and cultural variations all at the same time.
So it's not one or the other, it's all of it together. But that makes me wonder, if some emotions are just cultural performances, does that make them less real? Like, are they still valid?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, right? It brings us to this idea of emotions as myths, especially that disclaimed action thing we talked about. If we're just acting, even unconsciously, what does that say about the emotion itself?
Right. It's like, is it a real feeling or just a performance? But how can you even tell the difference?
Exactly. That gets into this whole question of sincerity. How can we know if someone's truly feeling it or just putting on a good show?
Like trying to read someone's poker face.
Exactly. And it gets even trickier when you factor in the unconscious mind.
Yeah, because we might not even be aware of why we're performing these emotions.
Precisely. Our unconscious desires, beliefs, they can drive our behavior, including our emotions, without us even realizing it.
Whoa, this is getting deep. My mind is officially blown.
We're just getting started. We've just laid the foundation, for understanding this crazy complex thing called emotion. And trust me, there's a lot more to uncover.
I'm ready for it. Let's keep going.
It really makes you think, how much of what we consider our true selves is actually shaped by things we're not even aware of? But does that mean those emotions are less real?
That's a great question. I'm thinking probably not. Like, even if an emotion is influenced by, culture, performance, it's still a real experience for the person feeling it, right?
I agree. It's how we experience it that matters. But some people, they argue that these performative emotions, they lack authenticity,
Yeah.
Depth.
Like, are we really feeling it or just going through the motions?
Exactly. It goes back to that disclaimed action idea. Are we putting on a show, consciously or not, to manipulate others? or to fit in? And if so, does that take away from it being a genuine human experience?
Yeah, like think about someone genuinely grieving versus someone just putting on a show of grief for attention.
Yeah.
Feels different, right?
And that's what bothers some people about this whole emotions as performances idea. They're saying it cheapens the experience, reduces it to just, like, theatrics.
But isn't there something powerful about understanding that culture and performance play a role? Like if we can see those influences, maybe we can be more self-aware, more compassionate.
I think so, for sure. Seeing those influences can be, like, really freeing. It lets us question the scripts we've been given, challenge those unhealthy patterns, and maybe even create a more authentic emotional life for ourselves.
Right, like if I know my anger might be partly because of cultural norms, then I can start to look at those norms and choose how I want to express my anger in a healthier way.
Exactly. It's about understanding where your emotions come from and then deciding, okay, how do I want to experience and express this? It's powerful stuff.
This is blowing my mind. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here.
Oh, we have. We've talked about biology, culture, even this idea of performance.
Yeah.
But how does the social constructionist view fit with those other theories? Like the effect programs, the evolutionary stuff. Are they all totally different, or can we connect them somehow?
Yeah, can we bring them all together?
I think we can. Remember heterogeneous construction.
Mhm.
Basically, our emotional phenotype, how we experience and express emotions, it's a mix of everything. Genes, culture, experiences, all of it.
So it's not nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture working together.
You got it. And this means that those biological things, like the affect programs, they can be changed and shaped by culture.
So our genes give us the basic building blocks, and then culture comes along and like builds them into unique structures.
That's a great way to put it. And this interplay between biology and culture, it helps explain how even universal emotions, like fear, are expressed differently around the world.
Like the basic fear response might be hardwired, but what triggers it, how we show it, that can be totally different depending on where you're from.
Exactly. So the biological view and the social constructionist view, they're not really opposites. They're just different ways of looking at the same thing.
Like different lenses,
Yeah.
right? We need both to really see what's going on.
Mm.
But this brings up that other question again. If some emotions are just performances, are they less real?
It's a question that keeps coming back, huh?
Yeah, because I'm starting to think even if it's influenced by culture, a performance, whatever, it's still a real valid experience for that person.
That's a really compassionate way to look at it. And you could definitely argue that it's how we experience it that matters, regardless of where it comes from.
Right. If someone's feeling intense sadness, who cares if it's because of a personal loss or because that's how their culture expresses grief? The sadness is real.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But then again, some would say that if it's mostly performance, it lacks that authenticity, the depth.
It's like, are they really feeling it or just doing what's expected?
And that brings us back to disclaimed action, right? Are we, like, consciously or unconsciously putting on a show to get something, to fit in? And if we are, does that mean the emotion is less meaningful?
Yeah, like, is it genuine grief or just grief performed for social approval? There's a difference.
And some people, they really struggle with that difference. They make the whole experience less real, you know? It's like a theatrical performance.
But doesn't acknowledging the role of culture and performance make us more self-aware, more compassionate?
Absolutely. Seeing those things for what they are, it can be super freeing. It allows us to, you know, question the scripts we've been given, maybe challenge some unhealthy patterns, and cultivate a more authentic and meaningful emotional life for ourselves.
Right, like if I realize my anger is partly due to cultural norms, I can look at those norms and decide, okay, is this how I want to express anger? Can I do it in a healthier way?
Exactly. It's about understanding your emotions, where they come from, and then making conscious choices about how you want to experience them, how you want to express them. That powerful stuff.
This whole conversation is mind-blowing. We've barely scratched the surface, haven't we?
We've only just begun. But we've covered some key ideas. We've talked about the biology, the cultural influences, even the possibility that emotions are like performances.
And we've wrestled with this idea of what makes an emotion real and started to see that even those culturally shaped or performative emotions, they can still be really important for us. So where do we go from here? How do we take all these different pieces and put them together into a complete picture of emotions?
The million-dollar question. I think the key is to embrace the complexity. Emotions, they're not easily explained by any one theory.
Right. It's not about picking sides. It's about seeing how everything works together. biology and culture, nature and nurture, all of it.
Exactly. We need to see how emotions are shaped by everything. Our biology, our culture, our personal experiences, our unconscious, even our environment. It's all connected, and that's what makes each person's emotional world unique.
It sounds like we need to make space for both the universal and the cultural, the innate and the learned, the authentic and the performative. It's all part of the picture.
Exactly. We need to hold all those pieces together, even if they seem contradictory, and see how they contribute to, like, the richness of our emotional lives.
This deep dive has really changed how I think about emotions. It's made me realize there's so much more to learn and explore.
Me too. That's what's so great about it. Emotions, they're a lifelong journey of discovery for each of us and for humanity as a whole.
Let's come back to the lecture for a second. One thing that really stood out to me was that idea of emotions as modules in the brain.
Ah, yes. Modularity. The idea that certain mental functions like language or vision, they have their own dedicated spots in the brain.
And some researchers think emotions might be like that too, like little emotional circuits.
Exactly. It fits with some of the evidence we've talked about, like how fast and automatic emotional responses can be.
Yeah, like those affect programs kicking in before we even have time to think. But we've also seen that emotions aren't totally isolated in these modules, right?
Right. They can be influenced by our thoughts, our beliefs, our culture. So it's probably more like a complex interaction between those specialized modules and other parts of the brain.
It's like those emotional circuits are connected to a bigger network, so they can communicate with other mental processes.
Exactly. That's how emotions can be both automatic and shaped by our thoughts and culture.
So it's not as simple as flipping a switch for each emotion, but if there are these specialized modules, does that mean they're separate from the like thinking part of our brain? Like, do we have an emotional brain and a rational brain battling it out?
That's a common idea, the whole heart versus head thing,
Yeah.
but it's too simple, really.
The reality is more nuanced than that, huh?
Way more. Emotions and thinking, they're partners, not enemies.
Sometimes they work together, sometimes they clash, but they're always influencing each other.
Exactly. And understanding that interplay, that's key to understanding ourselves and others.
Okay, so we've covered the biological and cultural stuff, but there's another piece to this puzzle, the evolutionary perspective. How did emotions evolve, and what role did they play in helping us survive?
The evolutionary perspective takes us way back, you know. It look at how emotions helped our ancestors in a world full of danger and opportunity.
It's like looking at emotions through the lens of survival of the fittest, right? Which emotions helped our ancestors stay alive and pass on their genes?
Exactly. And the key idea here is that emotions, they're adaptive. They're responses to challenges and opportunities in our environment.
So they're tools for survival, not just feelings.
Precisely. Take fear, for example. If you see a predator, you don't have time to think. Fear kicks in, triggers that fight or flight response, and boom, you might survive because of it.
A split-second decision that could mean life or death.
Exactly. Over time, the people with a strong fear response, they were more likely to live, to pass on their genes. That's how fear became such a powerful um, adaptive mechanism.
It makes perfect sense. What about other emotions? How did they help us survive?
Well, disgust probably evolved to keep us from eating things that would make us sick. Like, you smell rotten food, disgust kicks in, you don't eat it.
Disgust is like our internal food critic. What about anger?
Anger probably evolved to help us defend ourselves, our stuff, our social status. Someone tries to steal your food or hurt your family. Anger gives you the motivation to fight back.
So it's not just physical survival, it's about navigating the social world too, defending your place in the group.
Exactly. Emotions are deeply connected to how we interact and relate to each other.
We've talked about fear, disgust, anger, all pretty intense emotions. What about the more positive ones? How do they contribute to survival?
Well, let's think about joy. Joy probably evolved to reinforce behaviors that are good for us, good for survival and reproduction. You find food, you find a potential mate. Joy makes you want to keep doing those things.
Joy is like a reward system then. What about love? That one seems, I don't know, less obviously connected to survival.
Love might not be essential for immediate survival, but it's crucial for forming social bonds, for taking care of kids. Love creates attachment, cooperation, a sense of belonging. All of that helps individuals and the group survive and thrive.
Even those emotions that aren't about immediate survival still have a role to play, huh?
Exactly. They're all part of this intricate web that has shaped human behavior and
Yeah.
made us who we are.
The evolutionary perspective is so fascinating. It's amazing to think that emotions, these subjective experiences, are so deeply rooted in our biology. and have played such a crucial role in our evolutionary history.
It really adds another layer to our understanding. We've seen how emotions are shaped by biology, culture, experiences, and now our evolutionary past.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, uncovering new insights into this, like, fundamental part of being human.
Exactly. But there's one more thing we need to talk about. It's kind of a tricky one. It's this idea that if emotions are mostly shaped by cultural scripts or evolution, then maybe they're not really truly us.
The question of authenticity, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
If our emotions are just pre-programmed responses or cultural performances, what does that say about free will,
Yeah.
about individuality?
Right. It brings up all sorts of philosophical questions about, like, what does it mean to be human? To have real feelings? To express ourselves authentically?
Are we really in control of our emotions, or are we just puppets dancing to the strings of biology, culture, evolution?
That's the dilemma. And there's no easy answer. Some people might say that if you acknowledge those influences, it makes our emotions less real.
Like maybe we're not really feeling what we think we're feeling, we're just like reacting in a predetermined way.
Yeah, and that can be kind of unsettling, especially when it comes to emotions like love, grief, joy, those things that feel so personal, so meaningful.
Like if you tell me my love for my partner is just hormones and cultural conditioning, it kind of takes the magic away, right?
I get it. It can feel like it's reducing something beautiful and complex to something simple and, like, meaningless. But couldn't you also argue that understanding these biological and cultural influences can actually help us be more authentic, more aware of what's going on?
That's an interesting way to think about it. How so?
Well, like, if I understand that my anger might be partly because of that hardwired fight or flight response, then I can separate that from the actual situation.
So you can like choose how you respond instead of just reacting automatically.
That's the idea. Instead of just blindly reacting, you can pause, you can reflect, you can choose.
And that choice, that's where the authenticity comes in.
I think so. It's about knowing your own patterns, understanding where they come from, and then making conscious decisions about how you experience and express them.
That makes a lot of sense. Awareness is key.
Exactly. And that awareness, it extends to understanding the cultural influences too.
Right. If we know the cultural scripts we've been given for love, grief, joy, whatever, then we can decide if those scripts actually fit for us.
Those scripts, they're not the absolute truth,
Okay.
They're just cultural constructs.
And we can choose whether or not to follow them. That's where the real freedom lies.
Exactly. Instead of seeing biology and culture as, like, threats to our authenticity, we can see them as opportunities for growth, for deeper self-awareness.
Like, we can take ownership, see how everything interacts, and make choices about how we want to experience and express our own unique emotional selves. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from biology and evolution to culture and even philosophy. This deep dive has been like a roller coaster ride.
It really has. But even with all this new knowledge, there are still so many mysteries.
Right. Right. Like, how do emotions actually work in the brain? What are the specific pathways, and how do they connect with other mental processes?
And what about the mind-body connection? We talked about some of the physiological changes, but there's so much more to learn about how emotions affect our health, our behavior, even how long we live.
And what about the social side of emotions? We've seen how love, anger, guilt, all those things influence our interactions with others. But how do those dynamics play out in families, communities,
Yeah.
on a global scale?
So many questions still to be answered. It's what keeps this field so exciting.
It feels like we've only just started to explore this vast, uncharted territory.
Exactly. Who knows what incredible discoveries are waiting for us as we delve deeper into the mysteries of the human heart and mind.
This has been an incredible journey so far, but we're not quite done yet. There's one more perspective we need to look at, and it comes from cultural psychology.
Ah, yes, cultural psychology. This field really highlights how emotions are not just universal human experiences. They're also shaped by the unique cultures we live in.
So our culture leaves its mark on our emotions.
Exactly. It's like a cultural lens, shaping how we perceive, experience, and express our emotions.
So it's not just that different cultures express emotions differently, it's that the meaning of those emotions can change too. The actual experience is different.
Precisely. And cultural psychologists, they've found some amazing examples of how this works. Want to hear about them?
Absolutely. Give me some examples.
Okay, let's take anger. In a lot of Western cultures, anger is seen as a bad thing, something to be controlled or suppressed. We have this idea that anger is destructive, that it leads to conflict.
Yeah, we're always told to calm down or let it go when we're angry.
Right. But in other cultures, anger might be viewed completely differently. For example, in some collectivist cultures, anger might be a totally justifiable response to injustice or to a violation of social norms.
So it's not just about the individual feeling angry, it's about the context, the situation.
Precisely. And that difference in how a culture views anger can have a big impact on how it's experienced and expressed.
So in those cultures where anger is seen as okay, people might be more comfortable expressing it openly.
Exactly. And that open expression, it might not be seen as aggressive or threatening. It might be a way to restore harmony or to right a wrong.
Wow, that's so different from how we usually think about anger.
It really shows how culture shapes not just our behavior, but our understanding of emotions, too.
Okay, so anger is one example. What about other emotions? How do their meanings and experiences change across cultures?
Well, let's take sadness. In Western cultures, sadness is often tied to things like loss, grief, isolation. We tend to see it as something to be avoided or to get over as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we always hear cheer up or look on the bright side when we're feeling down.
Exactly. But in some cultures, sadness might be seen as a natural part of life, even something valuable. It might be a way to connect with others, to reflect on things, to appreciate happiness even more.
So instead of pushing sadness away, you actually allow yourself to feel it, to learn from it.
Precisely. And that acceptance could lead to more resilience, more well-being.
It makes me wonder, does our Western way of seeing emotions like sadness or anger as problems, does that keep us from experiencing them fully, from learning from them?
That's a great question. It's something cultural psychologists are really looking into. How do cultural norms and values shape not just our emotional experiences, but also our beliefs about what's a healthy way to express our emotions?
Okay, we've talked about anger, sadness, how cultural views of those emotions can differ. What about more positive emotions, like joy or love? Do those vary too?
Of course, let's take love, for example. We've already talked about how Western cultures often emphasize romantic love, but in other cultures, different kinds of love might be more important.
Right, like family love or communal love. Those might be more central in collectivist cultures where the focus is on the group.
Exactly. And that can shape how love is experienced. In cultures where romantic love is the ideal, people might be looking for those passionate, all-consuming relationships. But in cultures where family love is more central, people might find more meaning in their connections with family and their contributions to their community.
So the very definition of love, how it's expressed, the relationships it creates, all of that can be shaped by culture.
Precisely. And it's not just love, it's all emotions. Happiness, shame, pride, they're all viewed and experienced through this cultural lens.
It's wild how much our culture influences our emotions.
It really is. And it's something to keep in mind when you're interacting with people from different cultures. What's appropriate in one culture might not be in another.
Yeah, you could easily offend someone without realizing it.
Exactly. It's important to be aware of those differences and to approach those interactions with curiosity and respect.
Okay, so we've seen how cultural perspectives can change the meaning, the experience, the expression of emotions. But how does this cultural shaping happen? How do we learn these emotional scripts?
That's a great question. It takes us into the world of socialization, which is basically the process of learning the norms, values, and behaviors of your culture.
So it's like we absorb these emotional blueprints from the world around us.
Exactly. And it starts at birth. Our families, our communities, even the media we consume, it all shapes our emotional world.
Think about how parents react to their kids' emotions. If a kid's crying, some parents will rush to comfort them, while others might tell them to toughen up.
Right. Those responses send messages about what emotions are okay, how they should be expressed, and what kind of reaction you can expect from others.
It's not just what people directly teach us, it's the unspoken messages we pick up from our interactions.
Exactly. And those messages, they keep shaping us throughout our lives. We learn from our friends, our teachers, our romantic partners, even from watching strangers in public.
We're constantly bombarded with information about how to feel and act.
And our brains, they're really good at taking in that information and creating these complex neural pathways that shape our responses and how we understand the emotional world.
So it's an ongoing process of learning and adapting.
Exactly. And this interplay between biology, culture, and personal experience, that's what makes studying emotions so fascinating.
This has been an incredible journey. We've covered so much, from the biological basis of emotions to the cultural scripts that shape them. We've explored the evolutionary roots, the idea that emotions can be performances, and the importance of being sensitive to different cultures.
And we've wrestled with the big question: what makes an emotion real?
This deep dive has really given us a much deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
I agree. We've learned so much, but there's still so much we don't know.
Right. Like, how exactly do emotions work in the brain? What are the neural pathways involved, and how do they interact with our thoughts and behaviors?
What about the connection between emotions and our bodies? We've talked about the physical changes, but there's still a lot to learn about how emotions influence our health, our actions, even our lifespan.
And what about how emotions shape our social lives? We've seen how love, anger, guilt, all of those emotions can affect how we treat each other. But how do those dynamics play out in families, in communities, on a global level?
These are just a few of the unanswered questions that make studying emotions so fascinating.
It feels like we've only just begun to explore this vast, uncharted territory.
Exactly. Who knows what amazing discoveries await us as we continue to delve deeper into the mysteries of the human heart and mind.
This has been an incredible journey, but I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. What are your final thoughts?
It has been a fascinating exploration. We really went deep on those emotional complexities, huh?
Yeah, for sure. From biology and evolution to culture, even a little bit of philosophy, it's like we covered it all. But before we wrap up completely, I think we should step back for a second. What does it even mean to understand emotions this way? Like, how does it actually change how we live our lives?
That's a great question. It makes me think of this quote by Viktor Frankl. He said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom."
Whoa, I like that.
It really highlights, I think, the big
Yep.
takeaway from all of this. We might not be able to control what we feel, all those influences we talked about, but we can choose how we respond to those feelings.
So we're not denying biology or culture or evolution. We're just saying, hey, we still have choices in how we deal with those things. We can't always control the feeling itself, but we can control what we do with it, how we express it, how we let it affect our thoughts and actions.
Exactly. It's like we're the conductors of our own emotional orchestra, right? We might not be able to control every instrument, but we get to shape the overall performance.
Ooh, I like that.
And like any good conductor, it takes practice to develop that emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
self-awareness, and, being willing to listen to all the different parts of yourself.
That makes sense. Thinking back on everything we've talked about, I'm struck by this idea of balance. It's not about picking one side over the other. It's about recognizing that all these things are working together. Biology and culture, nature and nurture.
I totally agree. It's about finding that middle ground where we acknowledge the biological stuff, but we don't forget about culture and experience. It's about understanding that even if some emotions are tied to things we're not aware of or to social pressures, they can still be good for us.
Right. Like we talked about empathy, compassion, love. Those emotions can drive us to do good, to connect with others, to make the world a better place.
Exactly. It all points to a more nuanced understanding of emotions. They're complex, they're multifaceted, they're constantly changing.
They're not just simple reactions, they're shaped by so much. Our biology, our culture, our past experiences, even what's happening to us right now. So maybe instead of trying to make it simple, good or bad, real or fake, maybe the best way to be authentic is to just embrace all that complexity. See how much richer it makes our lives.
I love that. Embrace the complexity, don't oversimplify.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's like we've opened up a whole new way of understanding emotions.
And I hope that new understanding will help you, our listener, to, navigate your own emotional world with more awareness, more compassion, more skill.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this emotional roller coaster of a deep dive.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
To all our listeners out there, keep exploring those emotions, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.